Okay, so I thought I'd start with a history of the types of toys that Kid Robot makes. As you know, Kid Robot is really best known for making what's been called urban vinyl toys, fashion toys, or art toys. And what happened with me was that in 2002, I saw some toys that had come out of Japan and some toys that had come out of China that I completely fell in love with and decided to make a company so that I could make some of these things of my own, both myself and with my friends who are various different types of artists. And this is a picture of the Bounty Hunter store in Tokyo, in Harajuku. And Hikaru, who is the owner of that store, and is basically, he was fundamentally actually makes kind of a goth death metal clothing line, if that's the best way to describe it. And he grew up in Okinawa. And in Okinawa, there's an American military base, and he grew up completely obsessed with American culture. So, especially American breakfast cereals and things like that. And one of the things he did to promote his clothing line, and this would be in the early 90s, was to start to make vinyl toys. And he would make very small runs. And this is an example. And you can see, like, basically he would do these very small runs of vinyl toys and sell them in his shop, and pretty soon those toys became these sort of obsessive collector items. And one of the things he did is he would make only 100 or 200 pieces and really sold them almost as artwork. And you can see, like, Frankenberry being the inspiration for Skullcon, and more Skullcons. And more. And one of the other things that he did, which I think was a brilliant insight, which is that, you know, if you're making limited edition products and you're a very small company, generally it's the setup charges and the molds that cost so much money to actually produce. So one of the things he did was he realized that he could make one mold and then do variants of different colors and different designs from the same mold. And by doing that, he would cut costs and also create really what is, you know, iteration. So one of the things that you see quite a lot in the toy movement is iteration. That is, a lot of really the same design changed in different ways, and that comes both out of the fact that it's practical, because it has to do with the economics of running the business, but it also turns out to be a good design model, because for collectors, things that look nice next to one another, you're motivated to buy more because they look great next to each other on the shelf. This is another toy by Bounty Hunter. Many people consider it really the first vinyl collector's toy, and more. The other thing that he did, which was also brilliant, is it's just great design. I mean, if you look at this is like a one color piece of vinyl with a little bit of paint on it, and yet the design is really compelling. At the same time in China, two friends, Michael Lau and Eric So, began making toys of their own. And in China, in Hong Kong, there were these conventions. They're called toy conventions, and very much like a comic book convention here, people used to show up and trade toys. And there would be booths, and people would have collector's toys, and mostly it was old Japanese kaiju and G.I. Joes and classic toys, either from America or from anime or from Asia. And Michael started by he took G.I. Joe bodies, basically, and then would mold his own heads and sew his own clothing. You can see on the upper left actually one of his really very, very original toys, and he actually made his own boxes, which he would then cut out with an X-Acto blade. And he'd show up at these conferences and sell his own toys that he made, and people started collecting those as well. And then because he was so close to China, he also started to work in vinyl. The advantage of vinyl toys, one of the reasons that Kid Robot and many of these companies work in vinyl, is because the molds are very inexpensive to make. When you think about different types of plastic molding, injection molding, which is really ABS plastics, which is generally the most expensive. When you see those hard plastics that tend to be hollow, the molds can cost $20,000 or $30,000 each. Vinyl's made in a copper mold, And the copper molds are very inexpensive. They do degrade over time, but because you're not making very many pieces, it doesn't really matter. And so by using both Michael Lau and actually Hikaru from Bounty Hunter, by using this method, they could actually afford to make small runs of toys. These are more of Michael's designs. These are some of the made for Sprite in Asia. These are some of the earlier vinyl toys, also by Eric So. Alfonso Lam. I'm just going to show you a few of the early people that were sort of in doing this kind of stuff before Kid Robot and we came around. And this is Alfonso Lam and Jason Su. And the other thing that was happening is that the toys started to become popular in Japan, and then Japanese production companies started going to the West to look for artists to produce for the Japanese market. So like, for example, Pete Fowler, he actually created toys. He's British. He's a British artist, and he created toys, but they were really for the Japanese market. And same thing happened really with James Jarvis. Anyway, then 2002 rolled around, and I owned a company called Mini Disco, and we were sort of selling hacked up microphones and mini disc players that I was making films at the time, and I'd kind of become obsessed with sound recording. But when I saw these toys, I sold the company for about $250,000 and used the money to start Kid Robot. But what I didn't know at the time was that there'd been a lot of accounting errors and that I was actually $250,000 in debt. So I sold the company for $250,000, then spent that $250,000 to start Kid Robot, and then almost immediately thereafter discovered that I was $250,000 in debt again. And I was already in so much trouble that I pretty much had to make the company work. And I think that this is a good model for future entrepreneurs in the room. I would suggest if you can really kind of get yourself completely fucked, then you either succeed or go bankrupt. And it actually turned out that my parents' house basically their mortgage ended up being tied into all this, so that I grew up middle class, so we didn't have a lot of money. So if I had failed, it would have been really bad for my whole family. Dunny was created by myself and Tristan Eaton. Tristan Eaton did the drawing for the original toy. And this was inspired in some ways. We wanted to make a toy that was the best canvas possible, or we thought was the best canvas possible for artists to work with. So I'm going to show you some examples of Dunny. Dunny is a toy that's been repainted now by hundreds of different artists and is incredibly collectible and is now in the collection of the Museum of Modern Art. You can go see it on the design floor. Gary Baseman's version here. Sorry, I think I went too fast. This is Thomas Hahn. And To Die For, they're sort of a tattoo graffiti printing crew in Los Angeles. Gary Baseman, Cycle from here in New York. This is one of my favorites. It just came out by Amanda Vassell. She's a Los Angeles-based artist. So one of the things that happened with Dunny was that after a while, we discovered that people were buying them and then painting them over and then selling them as one-offs or customs. People were buying them just to customize on their own. So we created Money. And Money is a toy that only comes blank. Basically, it's an unpainted toy, and people do exhibitions with them. We do exhibitions with them. They're in curriculum for classrooms. They're in Iraq in the canteens. The soldiers buy them. And Money now has sort of this new family that's coming out this fall. I thought, are these pictures out publicly yet? Okay, so this is the first time anyone ever is going to see them. You guys are so lucky. So we decided that Money needed to have a family because it was really just a fun thing to do. So this is Raffi. And all the little friends and sort of the Money family are mixtures of bizarre animals and kind of space aliens. So sort of like half kangaroo, half slug. That's Tricky, and this is Bub. And these will be coming out in the next few months, I think. The other thing is that we often, even though we're really an adult brand, like Kid Robot really makes toys for adults, but we play with the we kind of play and appropriate with things from toys. So every money comes with a coloring book. This is an example of a page from I Love Dust, a British design company. And it comes with a coloring book, and sort of like Cabbage Patch Kids, they used to come with birth certificates. These come with "Hello, my name is" tags, which is another reference back to street art and graffiti. And I'm just going to show you a little survey for those of you who don't know us so well. These are of different artists we work with. This is Gloomy Bear by Maury Chacks. This is a story of a little boy who finds a bear in the woods and falls in love with the little baby bear and brings up the little baby bear and feeds it and nurtures it, and the bear grows up, and then the bear bites the little boy's head off. So there you go. This is a new toy also that we have coming soon. Also, one of our best-selling toys, Frank Kozik's Smork and Labbit. This was actually, the original Smork and Labbit was produced by Bounty Hunter, but it came from poster art done by Frank and from something he drew on a napkin in a Chinese restaurant. You'll notice the butthole, which is a big selling point. This is the Report for Punishment bondage version that we did initially for a nightclub that we designed up in Toronto for Peter Gatien. There's a whole section of that nightclub. This was an exclusive there, and also has a butthole. The 1984 New Wave rabbit. And these are I just thought you'd be interested. This is the original design for the new plush version with the rear entry. It actually has a pink silk butthole. And that's a really big selling point, because one of the things I ask whenever we're sitting in meetings, just trying to decide what to design is, what's the hook? It's something that, like, I have a friend who's a pop musician. He always asks about his songs, where's the hook in the song? And it's the same thing for everything we make. Where's the hook? The hook for the Labbit's a cigarette, but I actually think the hook for the Labbit is the butthole. Another toy from Frank Kozik, we replaced a cigarette with a mustache. We were kind of getting hell for all the smoking, so we put smoking as bad on all the toy boxes as kind of a defense mechanism. Frank's Bird is the Word, which is mouse ears. Also one of the early toys we did, also designed by Tristan Eaton. This is the original Kid Robot. Kid Robot, again, is made in iteration. This is our logo toy, and he's always numbered, and we do limited editions. So this was number 1. The thing about the Kid Robot logo is he's designed with an underbite. I have an underbite. And he's designed with an underbite because you can't tell whether he's laughing or smiling. It's kind of a Mona Lisa design. So if he's got, as you see, a crowbar in his hand, he's going to break into your car. But if he has a flower, he's actually really cute. This is a Kid Bomber. The Kid Robber. These were originally 1,200 of these made, but we had a fight with our factory, and we lost 1,000 of them. So this is one of the rarest toys we've ever made. Only 100 made it through in the end. This was Huck Gee did a version for us that was a Kid Ninja. This came out recently in connection with, we did a pop-up shop at Suffrages in London. This is the Kid Punk. Okay, just some random stuff. So Fat Cap by the same crew, To Die For, and Tulip by Tado. They're in, what town are they in? Chad? Near Manchester somewhere. Yeah. The Totem Doppelgangers. And some toys we did with an artist, Junko Mizuno from Japan. Junko we really actually, Kid Robot steers away from manga. But this is kind of an exception because Junko's art is just so phenomenal, and it kind of pushes the boundaries of what manga art is. So these are from her stories. Really great, really twisted stuff. We just did a minifigure set with her as well. And I thought I'd talk a little bit about, like, the minifigures. We create all kinds of toys, and a lot of them are sort of these larger toys that are limited edition, but we also sell these small toys, and they come in boxes that we call blind chase. And you buy the box and you don't know what toy comes in it, and some of them are more common and some of them are pretty rare. The rare ones can be hundreds and hundreds of dollars on eBay. This is designed by Mad. He's an artist in Kansas City. And just for fun also, to give you an idea of the process of making a toy. So this was a cover of Vapors magazine by Doze Green. And I saw it and called up Doze and said, I know Doze is like, if anyone doesn't, he's a street artist. He was a member of the original Rocksteady crew. He's a fine artist now. He's a painter. And I said I'd really like to make this into a toy. So Doze did some drawings, and then we did some turnarounds in Adobe Illustrator. And you can see, we try to get every possible angle. We then did, we do color version, so we can see what it's going to look like when it's colored in. And all the PMS colors are marked pretty accurately. From there, if we're using hand sculpting, it will then go to a wax sculpt. Sometimes now we're using computer sculpting, but I don't like it as much. Most of the time it doesn't have the same life to it. It's good for certain things, but it's good for things that are very symmetrical. But if you want something with a lot of life, it can be much more expensive to get out of a computer, and you might as well just have someone hand sculpt it. So from the wax version, we'll then end up with a painted sample, and then from the painted to a production sample. Here's a new toy coming out from JK5. He's a tattoo artist and really amazing guy. He's got a studio in Brooklyn. Toy we did with Mad Villain. Swiss Beats. This is part of the P-Col project. We created sort of our version of Playmobil. And we've worked with some fashion designers. So we did this with Visionaire magazine about 3 years ago with Louis Vuitton. I've got a little pointer here so I can do this. Louis Vuitton, Prada, Hedi Slimane, Karl Lagerfeld, Versace, and Hermes. There a set of 5 toys were about $300 each. And we did a couple sets. We did, I think, 4 sets with them. So I thought also I'd talk. So I'm going to talk for a little while, and then if there's time, which there almost certainly will be, I can answer questions. I'd talk a little about the kid-robot creative process, and I'd start out with the cool shit index. So we're a fairly intuitive company, but this is one of the struggles with Kid Robot is that you want to keep sort of a feeling of exclusivity, right? And you want to make sure, you need to pay attention all the time that you're not repeating yourself too much, that you're not getting old, and that your fans don't get tired of you. And I thought as a sort of explanation of how we think about things, I'd create this cool shit index, and on the top there you can see really fucking cool. And down here, everyone seems to have one, and down there wouldn't be caught dead with it. And this is sort of a time scale. And I'm going to use, as an example, the members-only jacket. So, because in 1981, I totally wanted a members-only jacket, and I couldn't afford one, and I thought they were amazing. And really, there were this really small crew of kids that were wearing those. And then sort of what happened, as time passed, they sort of started to dissipate, and more people were wearing them. So the cool kids were wearing them, but then it started to kind of get more and more out there. And you guys all know how this works. So after a while, everyone seems to have one. And as everyone seems to have one, it kind of enters the mass of culture to the point where you actually wouldn't be caught dead wearing one. And the whole style totally dies, right? So this is like the traditional everyone knows it cycle of trends, but what people don't realize is there's sort of the Williamsburg effect. And the Williamsburg effect is that suddenly the stuff's sitting there on the bottom, and then it pops up right at the top again is the coolest thing ever. And then it goes down again, and the cycle sort of repeats itself. And recently we sort of had this internal debate, because what happened is Matt Groening came to us and with The Simpsons, and I love The Simpsons, and I know that it may not be necessarily cool to love The Simpsons or cutting edge, but I do, and we really wanted to work with him, and he actually they redrew The Simpsons in the style of our toys, and I just thought that was so amazing. And the internal debate we had was, how do we, if we want to do things like this, which we do, how do we sort of stay cool? And and on the other hand, they're also profitable, and that profitable is okay. It supports the rest of the company. And this was a chart done by Nitin in our wholesale department that I thought was really brilliant, which is awesomeness versus volume, right? So at some point in our company, with some toys, we produced too much stuff, right? And then people who used to think we were awesome thought we weren't so awesome, but we had a lot of stuff. And so what we did in order to become awesome again is we started to produce less stuff, and see, now we're awesome again. And the thing with The Simpsons is, like, how do you do that at the same time? And what we came to realize, this is another thing, this is the first time you guys get to see this, no one's seen this, that what we're doing is we're launching another line, which is based and inspired by those early bounty hunter toys that, like, I love so much. And this line that I'm not even going to tell you the name of it, it's so secret, but I'll show you a picture of the toy, is what we're doing is we're keeping our exclusivity, but at the same time we're kind of slowly moving out into, we can slowly move out and do stuff that's maybe a little bit less exclusive. It's kind of a way to keep the balance, but everything is still awesome, as you saw on the chart, like nothing sucks. I give you a little survey of the artists we work with. Frank Kozik, really one of my favorite artists of all time. A black slide. Tilt, who's he's a graffiti artist from France. He does all the photography for our clothing line. Actually, this is the view out the back window of our office. He made this beautiful graffiti for us. We're up on 22nd Street. He did this as a kind of a gift for us with another artist, Mist. Jeremyville, Ayaka Keita, who's here in New York. Jeremy is from Australia. And I thought I'd just show you guys. I'm working on some children's books with these guys. So this is one called Pink Socks that I'm doing with Jeremyville. Here's like a page from it. So I wrote the books and they're doing the illustration. Here's an illustration from a book called The Boy with a Hole in the Middle, about a little boy who's got a hole in the middle of his tummy. And Mrs. Ayaka Keita is doing the drawings for that. And the third illustration is from a third kid's book that I'm doing, which is about all the different kinds of farts, done by Jesse Ledoux. So this is the enormous scary monster farts, but it really has every kind of fart and every kind of fart sound. The idea is really to liberate farts. We're going to start, like, we have t-shirts, like I farted, ask me how, all that kind of stuff. Tristan, this is a little survey of the artists who work with. Tristan Eaton, he's local, and Tara McPherson, who's like really amazing, and Devil Robots from Japan, and we just teamed up with Jeff Staple, who's here. I was looking for a funny picture of Jeff, but this is what I found. So he has this really awesome black and white photo, but Jeff's doing our clothing line with us now. I'm really excited about, which brings me into apparel. So apparel, photos by Tilt. The idea was to create clothing that was sort of inspired by the culture of the toys. We're like purposely dorky and not too cool, so it always has a slightly awkward feel to it. Each season has a different theme. This season's theme, the season that's out right now, was Catholic Schools Gone Bad. And we've done other things as well. Backpacks, and with Tarina Tarantino, she's doing jewelry with us. We did a snowboard set with Burton, sneakers with Lacoste, a car with Volkswagen. This is the little dunnies on the car, and all the interior parts of the car glow in the dark. So it's the first glow-in-the-dark car. So you can find it in a parking lot. And then just a couple pictures of our stores that don't look like normal toy stores. They're really inspired by, they were inspired really in many ways by Moss and by that sort of clean white gallery feeling, and creating value by putting things behind glass. Okay, so the rest of my talk, which will only be a few more minutes, is about creativity and sort of how we work. And I just love this picture of David Lynch, which I think it was from about 7 or 8 years ago. And I saved it. And basically, so I realized something only about half a year ago. And what I realized was, like, I do a lot of the creative along with our creative team, that when I'm in my creative mode, I can't remember. I'm really excited and we're doing tons of stuff, but then afterwards I can't remember myself. Like, I don't know if any of the creative people in the room have this experience, but you do something and it just kind of bursts forth out of you and you're working on it, and then afterwards I can't even remember that I did that. And being sort of insecure, it means that like I kept walking around just like feeling like really lousy, like I'd never done anything with my life at all, like what a loser. And I realized that in therapy, what was happening was basically that I couldn't, that there was like this internal disconnect. And one of the other things I realized was that a lot of my creativity was deeply connected with fear, and not necessarily in a bad way. So I wrote this down, and it says the connection between fear and creativity is both inevitable and unnecessary. So first I'm going to show you why it's inevitable. So I have a 1-year-old daughter, and this is not her, and but this could be, because like when we were children, many of us discovered that food was a really great medium for art, right? So we painted with it, we put all over our faces, we threw it on the floor, we threw it on our parents, and we were having a great time. And then what happened was, to many of us, someone came up and said that that's bad, and you're bad for like playing and doing this stuff with food and with a lot of other things in our lives. And so what happened is we started to close down. We had a negative association with that kind of creativity. So this is my next great chart. So when we were very young, we kind of started out with a total abandon and freedom. Like, you know, if you look at the little kids play, they're totally creative. They're not self-conscious at all, right? And then sort of time passes. And then people say, well, that's wrong, and you can't do that, and that's bad. And you were less creative. So by the time you're 4, you're probably about half as creative as when you're 1. And then you go to school, and it's really dull, and there are a bunch of teachers that say nasty things to you. And you want to conform, and your friends are mean, and the whole story. And you get to high school, and you're somewhere down here. And then about here, you kind of cross the line of the average artist in the MoMA permanent collection, which is like why we walk into art museums. I mean, I love museums, but you walk in, you're like, this stuff is like so boring, it sucks. Like, why, what's so interesting about this? And the fact is, it's not that interesting and it's not that creative. That's the secret. And then you get down to where we are today. And this is like time. And really what's going on is that our minds have started to intrude on our hearts. So like our hearts and our bodies are really where creativity comes from, which is kind of where I was going with this, which is the reason why I couldn't remember myself being creative is because the part of that is being creative is not in the mind. It wasn't the I was associating myself with. It was the creative I is in your body. And the more the mind sort of starts to intrude, you guys all know this, you're sitting in a meeting and someone says, think creatively. Come on, think creatively. And you can't do it because you can't think creatively. It's in your body. So I wrote this down also, which is fear is the coping mechanism that we develop when we can't deal with our own inner strength. So it's sort of like we actually have a lot of internal power, and the part of us that is creative never really goes away. But what happens is we create fear around moving toward creativity, and it gets so ingrained we don't even see that it's there after a while, and it keeps us from really being creative. And so this may be my last chart of this thing. But so this is us, and I put a little lab there who's trying to make a decision, and the decision is between comfort and what we're afraid of. And living a creative life is the act of continuously turning toward what scares us. Because when we want to be creative, whether we're creating a business, whether we're creating a toy or apparel or any of the other stuff that we're doing in our lives, or we're just trying to create good relationship, right? Between ourselves, our lovers, our wives or girlfriends or boyfriends or husbands, children. It's my experience that turning toward fear is like kind of a flag up there. And what we're afraid of, if we keep turning toward it, interesting things happen. So here's a list of things that kill creativity. Me, that is making it all about me. Comfort and lack of preparation. It's really this simple as far as I'm concerned. And if anyone that works at our company knows that this is what we try to foster. So here's examples of me. Statements like, I'm a genius. I'm totally talentless. I suck. If I don't do a good job, I'm a total loser. I'm afraid to ask for help because of any millions of reasons. Because I have to do it, because I have to be special, because people will see that I actually don't know what I'm doing. And by the way, anyone who works at Kid Robot also knows that I spend most of my time trying to get other people to answer the questions for me, because a lot of the time I find that just by asking the question, the answer comes, but having what I think is the courage to actually say I don't know and ask for help, which takes a lot of courage, leads to great results. Things like once I'm famous or once I'm rich or really needing, it's okay to, everyone sort of neurotically wants people to like them. The question is whether or not you're going to let people liking you is going to stop you from being creative. My parents have boring lives, my friends have boring lives, and I'm just like them, like projecting ourselves. And really in the end, it's that the question is whether your fear is bigger than you are. So in the end, we have to get our minds out of the way. We have to kill our egos if we're going to be creative, and we need to create processes for doing that. Other things that kill creativity. Comfort. As the few people up here who work with Kid Robot know, our company is really fun. We have a great culture, lovely people. It's an uncomfortable place to work because things are often changing. And truthfully, we keep it uncomfortable. Because if you get too comfortable, you start repeating yourself. Money. Security. And some people are just comfortable being abused. And there's nothing wrong with that, but if you notice that that's true about you, that's, some people are more comfortable, would rather keep themselves in an abusive situation than actually take the initiative to change their lives or to move toward being creative. Lack of preparation. Creativity is alchemical. You need to have the right ingredients in the pot. Very simple things like materials, having the right help, and having heat. Whoops. See if that happens again. Help and heat. Yeah. So, basically you need heat. Kid Robot, no one makes individual creative decisions. Everything's done in a group. And the rooms tend to be very hot. That is a lot of pressure. We have to make a lot of decisions in a short period of time. Things that kill creativity, as I said, and things that nurture creativity. Asking for help, preparation and discipline, and following our fear and having the courage to be bigger than it, which I think is sort of the key one. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you. Questions? If we got 5 minutes, or do we not? Are we done? Great. You can talk to me individually. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no, it's okay. This is mine, okay. But this isn't. Yeah, you want to email me and I'm just calling over. Email me all quick.
And just for our last panel today, the one that I think many of us have been looking forward to, we are bringing on stage two, like Paul, icons of their industry. The first that I'll introduce, I'm sure he's familiar to lots of us, is Jeff Staple. And Jeff has been with or participating in the Imprint Culture Lab for the last 3 years. And so every year we ask Jeff to dig into his personal collection of contacts and bring someone on that he thinks would be a good conversation. And this year we decided, and Jeff obliged, to bring Marc Ecko. Sorry, well, feedback there. I'm sure all of you know Ecko Enterprises, Ecko Unlimited. Marc is the founder, CEO, and chairman of this sort of giant company that we've all come to recognize and participate with. So Jeff Staple, of course, is the founder, CEO, and creative director of Staple Design, and we think this is going to be a great conversation. So without further delay, I'll bring them both up here for their one-to-one.
So am I sitting here next to you, or what are we doing? How is this?
Whatever you're comfortable with.
Comfortable sitting next to you.
Good. All right.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
Good.
So I will start this by briefly introducing myself again. My name is Jeff Staple. I'm the founder and creative director of Staple Design. We are an apparel company, a creative agency. We have a retail store called Reed Space, which is located in the Lower East Side, lifestyle store and art gallery as well. We also have a publication, a magazine called Reed Pages. And about a year ago, I started doing a series called One-to-One, which was basically a concept that I came up with where I wanted to basically talk one-to-one with people that I really respected, that people in my circle sort of really respected as well. And the difference between, I think, me talking to someone and a reporter talking to someone was that you sort of get maybe like a inside view on how a creative person or an entrepreneur talks to another person who's like-minded, and then I think different things come out than your standard Q&A. So I've done a couple of those, and one of them was Marc Ecko last year, and it was one of the most well-received ones. It was very interesting. So that's what I do. We only have 40 minutes today, so. And I know, we want to have time for Q&A as well. So I'm going to very quickly do an introduction of the man who's sitting next to me here, and then really get into sort of more deeper things after the introduction. So, Marc, let me know if I make any mistakes in my statistics.
Marc with the C.
That's number one, yes.
Yes, with the C.
Marc with a C founded Ecko Unlimited in 1993. Since then, he's grown to become Marc Ecko Enterprises, MEE. This includes, and I assume I'm going to miss some stuff here, but there's Ecko, the men's clothing line, Ecko Red for women. Mm-hmm. There's eyewear, there's fragrances. He acquired Zoo York, which is a New York's legendary skate company. Averex, which is a legendary military-inspired company. G-Unit, which is 50 Cent, the rapper's clothing label as well. He's also dabbled in video games for Atari.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, for myself, but Atari published it, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So video games. Yeah. He recently did the Dexter video game,
Dexter game that just came out last week on the iPhone.
Right,
yes.
Okay. And of course, he has his own magazine and online publishing company called Complex.
Yes. Complex
Magazine, which is really one of the most influential street urban magazines out right now and still in business.
Thank you.
So Marc is now 37.
That's correct.
Okay, 37. Marc Ecko Enterprises has a staff of over 1,000 people, with sales hovering around the neighborhood of $1 billion. Ecko is the dominant label in the streetwear urban category. So if you look at rival brands like Russell Simmons' Fat Farm, P. Diddy's Sean John, Jay-Z's Rockaware, Ecko really sits on top of all of those. And it's saying a lot when all of those brands are really headed up by black hip-hop luminaries, real royalty in hip-hop. And Ecko is headed up by two Jewish kids from New Jersey.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. You ever ask yourself how that happened?
Well, I'm black on the inside.
Okay. Hence you're wearing all
Yeah,
black.
right. I don't know that I ever asked myself if how that happened. I mean, look, I grew up in the 80s in a really unique time within popular culture, when hip hop was this very kind of like naive and emergent thing, and it was clearly a movement, and I had the good fortune growing up in a community that was really ethnically diverse. So when you're in 4th grade, 5th grade, and your peers are different shades, and the music of choice that everyone's listening to is hip hop, and it was this emergent thing.
Yeah.
So for me, I was too fat. I've said it before. I was too fat to break dance, and I really didn't have the chops to rap. Although I did attempt to rap once, and it was just the worst shit ever. So you're a product of your environment. I know that sounds cliche, but that's the truth.
Right.
Only in America.
Yeah, it's definitely true.
So.
Marc also has a knack for making news in very unfashion-related ways. So a couple of years back, there was a YouTube clip that was leaked of what looked like Marc tagging on the Air Force One presidential plane, still free on one of the engines.
Yeah.
And this really spread worldwide, millions and millions and millions of hits.
Yeah.
Again, really not having to do with and buy this T-shirt at the end of it. It was it was really just driving the brand, driving the message, right?
Yep. Yeah. That was pre-Barack Obama Air Force One.
Right. This was
much different Air Force One.
This was Bush's Air Force
One.
Yeah,
Right?
yes.
Yes.
And this was, I should also say, this was pre-viral, cool web marketing. Really,
it was when
really
YouTube.
nascent.
Yeah, YouTube was this. YouTube was this brand new. Well, what was not really brand new, but I think that was a unique window of opportunity within culture, because YouTube was kind of so new, and that cynicism that we all have now that we watch every YouTube video. We're so cynical of how produced or not produced it was. There was that window in time where this video medium, everything you viewed was being done by someone with just handheld camera.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a lot of fancy editing, but there was in this case, and that was a unique window. I think it would be hard to pull off again.
Right.
Now, having lived after seeing Kobe jump a Maserati or whatever other trickery that's been out there.
Right.
So.
The other thing that recently happened was that Marc purchased Barry Bonds' record-breaking home run baseball, not for his personal collection, but he really wanted to make a statement with it, I think. You asked online voting to vote the fate of the ball, basically. So I think the 3 options were, what was first? Donate it?
It was donate the ball to the Hall of Fame as it was in its existing state,
right.
or take the ball and brand it with an asterisk, and then give it to the Hall of Fame.
Right.
The A choice was leave it in the current state and give it to the Hall. B choice, brand it, asterisk, give it to the Hall. And C choice was put it on a rocket out of,
Shoot it into space.
Yeah, out of sight, out of mind.
Right. So obviously with this image.
Yeah.
It's,
the asterisk one. And I think that was an interesting window of opportunity, kind of culturally we are, it was a little bit of hard news mixed with a little bit of American Idol.
Yeah.
And that kind of real populist tone, I think, was in the air pre the Obama administration, that was kind of bubbling. And I think this whole notion of people using whatever means necessary to get an advantage was something that we were sick of being duped on. And if it was baseball or if it was, Lehman Brothers or AIG, I think this was an interesting kind of precursor to culturally what ended up happening, 2 years later with the Mitchell report. And it was actually about a year later when the Mitchell report happened. But then just even, I think, as a signal, I think baseball is this evergreen signal of, if you really want to get a glimpse into American culture, understand baseball.
Yeah.
Which is a fabric of our culture.
Right.
And it's kind of funny how, this was kind of this precursor as a symbol to many institutions in this country that were on some sort of performance enhancing
Yeah.
mechanism of some sort.
How much did you pay for the ball?
I paid, I think like $750 or something like that, $750,000.
$750?
$7,000.
$750,000.
Something like
right?
that, 800.
So, okay, you own a business, and obviously you have like some CFO accounting people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, if you spend $750K on an ad campaign for the clothing line, or $750K on like,
Right.
a catalog,
Right.
makes sense.
Right.
So how do you justify $750K on a ball?
That was a good year. We had a surplus of cash. Well, first of all, it was an idea that I had, that I should say it was a collective kind of, this little virus that was in the company where it was like, could you imagine if, what
Yeah.
if? So we had about a 2.5, 3-month window where we were volleying around, can you imagine when? And we had put in our minds a notion of what the ceiling would be.
Uh-huh.
And I actually thought it would come in as more.
The
So,
ceiling was higher.
yeah, with
Okay.
the ceiling was a little bit higher. So we kind of had this line item in the budget, and
ball,
we've
750K ball.
always had in the marketing budgets, these kind of like those kind of holy shit. Can you imagine if was as a line item,
Right.
and it's hard to plan around, but they come every few years, and if the moment is there, you got to go for it.
Yeah. And I assume you would have done it all over again.
Yeah,
judging
on
by
that
how much-
one.
How much
On-
press and stuff you got.
Yeah, on that one, that was a good one.
Yeah.
And I mean, not to be, look, people say it was sensational, it was opportunistic, and I always push back. Yeah, if sensational means that you made someone feel something.
Mhm.
In a day and age where it's so hard to create that kind of transaction with the consumer, something that you could emotionally feel.
Right.
I thought that was a really special, deep moment. For some people, it was polarizing, but I think, when I look back on it now and I reflect on it, I think when we reflect on it, just broadly in terms of, the fact that now it's in the Hall of Fame, now it's on full exhibition. This wasn't an indictment of Barry Bonds. This was, look, if you notice the image, the asterisk is over Bud Selig's name. I mean, it was much more of an indictment on tolerating, like trying to like pull the wool over our eyes,
Right.
and tolerating it and even rewarding it.
Yeah.
And obviously, look, post A-Rod, post, everyone and their mother almost. And not to think that, look, performance enhancing substances are hard to detect. I mean, who knows what other sports it exists in,
Right.
So,
And then, of course,
unfortunate.
there is art, art and more art.
Yeah.
You started as an artist.
yeah,
And we had a conversation before, which maybe I'll brush on later, about you sort of dabbling more into art.
yeah.
But again, these are all things that are readily Googleable and wikiable. You can find all these facts with one click about him. So, I just wanted to go through that. And before we get into a little bit deeper sort of topics, by the way, on your wiki page is a glaring error.
What is it?
It says your company right now is around $1 million instead of $1 billion.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
That's good.
Wikipedia.
You should just leave that.
Yeah, I'll leave that one.
So let's get into it. I often view life sort of as like a superhighway, like a freeway, with everyone sort of trying to get to various destinations, but most people basically taking the same road to get there. Every once in a while, certain people decide, fuck this road, and I'm going to take my own road, and they veer off into a different direction. And sometimes there's not even a road made for them. It's just, they just decide to make their own road. And hence, that's the concept behind this theme of pathfinders. You are obviously one of those pathfinders, I think. When I was growing up and starting my clothing brand and starting my business, I definitely looked at yours as sort of like a wow, like that's pretty incredible. And so when you start to veer off onto your own path, there's always one critical moment where you decided, screw this road, I'm going to go off onto my own road. And I just want to know if you can recall sort of that moment of clarity where you're like, I'm making a left right here, whether there's a road or not.
In life, there's no such thing in nature. And I've said this before, and I don't know where, it's like some probably ancient proverb or something. But, there's nothing in nature that you could find that's a straight line.
Yeah.
Like nothing. You will not find a vein in your body that's a straight line. You will not find, can't walk through the woods and find rocks lined up in a perfectly straight line. But so much of how we educate our kids in really Western culture and even Eastern culture to a certain extent in terms of their expectations and vetting the quality of their straight line. It's like, check, they passed that one. Check, they did well, they tested well at that one. And then we create those kind of benchmarks to follow a path.
Right.
And life's just not like that. So for me, it wasn't like there was, and I think it's probably the case for everybody in this room, I don't think there was one thing. It wasn't like one watershed moment, I mean, I guess you could say the watershed moment was like my mother allowing me to get an air compressor and an airbrush in 8th grade, and allowing me to pursue that. Because, the notion of an 8th grader getting $150 airbrush and air compressor, even though it was a used air compressor from Sears, it's kind of like buying your kid a piano. Maybe they'll take piano lessons, maybe they won't. You don't want to turn it to this piece of dusty hardware. But I guess that was a big deal. But there were a bunch of beats along the way. One of, I guess probably the one that was the biggest vote of confidence came from a dean at Rutgers College of Pharmacy in 1993, which was the year when I incorporated, actually the end of 92. I went to John Kalezi, who's retired. He was the dean of pharmacy school. He was the first academic advisor in my career to look at me and say, Mark, you don't want to shoulda, coulda, woulda. You don't want to later on in life regret that you didn't try something. I went to him and asked for a year off. And if you took a year off of a 5-year program like pharmacy school, you have to retake the year, right? So that was, the notion of retaking like inorganic medicinal chemistry. Like that was not really an attractive idea, right? So he said, you know what, I won't make you retake the year. If you leave now and you go for it, you could come back in a year.
Without retaking a year.
Without having to retake
so he
a year.
Brokered a deal with
he kind of gave me the parachute. He gave me that. So I he was a really important person in my life. And when it took me years later where I really kind of reflected on it and was like, wow, that's kind of deep. Because most times, it's not often enough that an educator says to someone like, do what you're passionate about.
And quit school,
because school's not cut out for, not everybody's cut out for school.
Right.
Like for me, I went to the classroom didn't come to me. And the classroom was out in the real world. So
how about so that was sort of, you said your mom getting an airbrush machine, and then you said school. How about after the business? Like, because even after you take, and you'll probably agree with this, like after you take that first path off and veer off, eventually that path then becomes like a wider road and a wider road. In your case, it becomes a whole nother highway onto itself.
Yeah.
And then you have to then break off again possibly and find another path.
Yeah.
So how about after you started the business? Was there like another sort of point where you're like,
there's so many.
Another left.
There's so many points. I think it's one of the things being in this business, appealing to this demographic, you have to be, pretty fluid and pretty, you attempt to be as introspective as possible, not at the point where it totally incapacitates you, where you can't make a decision, but how do you balance like being commercially responsible, create a business that's a viable, commercially responsible business with something that's, creatively gratifying enough.
Yeah.
So that's always been like striking that, I call it like your inner Yoda, that balance between like, well, what is it that like my deep down inside creative spirit wants to do, which could be very self-indulgent and very self-serving sometimes, okay? And then balancing that with like, well, what's going to be sustainable, as a business, and how do you strike that chord? And I think that's what I use as kind of, the North Pole and South Pole of my whatever you call that thing on your iPod.
Accelerometer.
No, my accelerometer.
Yeah.
What do you call that again?
I think that's what it's called.
Compass, right?
Oh, compass. Okay.
Very, very analog of us, isn't it?
Well, can you recall a time in your business recently where you felt like it was sort of
Oh gosh,
on one
yeah,
side?
yeah. I mean, I would say actually, we've had there've been probably a half a dozen times in my career where it's just been like, you know, the last 2 years, pre the crash of Lehman's, when you had a lot of leverage, and excuse my French on this one, I say this in advance, any of the ladies in the room, but having a lot of leverage was like having giant genitals. Right? I mean, back in the day, I know that it might be not the most appropriate metaphor, but dudes understand what I mean, okay? Having a lot of leverage was like a big deal. Mm-hmm. And the perfect storm of the economic crisis of the last year and being in an overly expansion mode has you, like, at one day you're planning 150 retail stores, the next day you're planning on how you're going to cut back 20 of them.
Right.
So, that's a part of the realities of risk reward and running a big business. Yeah. And you got to be fluid. You can't be overly emotional about it. You can't hold on to your nostalgia. Mm-hmm. You can't have nostalgia paralysis. You can't be paralyzed by the emotional parts of what you want to do because you did it before. Right. Versus like what you need to do in order to be relevant and exist.
Right. Recently, there's been a lot of press, mm-hmm. news, rumors about the current state of your company and the empire that you've built. Yep. I always like to hear it from the horse's mouth. So sure. Do you want to expand on what's going on right now?
Yeah. Look, it's like it's very simple. There was a tremendous amount of debt that I incurred about 2 years ago in expanding the retail operation, when we came off of a year that was a very cash positive year, without getting too inside baseball, but it was a really good year. And it was a year where we could leverage up. Right. And we levered up with CIT, which is a banking institution that recently has been in the news for having their own kind of set of financial issues. The market softening up about 2 years ago, coupled with the banking crisis, mm-hmm. was like this perfect storm. Whereas all of a sudden, the guys you owed a lot of money to, it's like they say, you think you own the company. You really don't own the company. The bank owns the company. So it became the focus number one in terms of taking down our term debt. Right. And term debt is like the immediate first position debt that was owed to CIT. So the last year or so, the fundamentals of business have actually been really good, mm-hmm. right? We've been making and beating our plans, right? But when you're in a tremendous amount of debt, you have to figure out, well, how do I recapitalize my debt to finance my business? So, eventually, I imagine, based on the current credit crunch that's out there in the world, like I'm going to eventually, if there's a deal to be had, I'll probably create some kind of transaction where I could alleviate at least half the burden of that debt. Okay. So that's where I'm at. This is not, this is like, newsflash. Hello. This is not unique to me. Mm-hmm. This is something that is a pretty common situation. So I think it becomes a little bit, it becomes a little bit pulpy, especially if you're in the industry. In the apparel industry, only because of the trajectory of our growth. It was just so fast, and it seemed that way, at least.
Apparel is one of those industries where you have to spend to make.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not like just knowledge-based.
Yeah. So, look, we did a lot of things. When I reflect on it, what are things that we did that were right? Look, we expanded retail. For better or worse, it costs a lot of money to expand retail. Mm-hmm. Could I have spent that money smarter today, knowing what I know? Abso-fucking-lutely, mm-hmm. right? The way that I financed fixtures, the nature of leases that were signed. Then when the market goes underwater, all of a sudden you own leases where they're underwater leases because the rent costs go down because mall lessees, landlords have now struggling malls. But despite that, we've managed to make our retail really work. Mm-hmm. So in the last year, of the 100 stores that we owned, we had to close 6. But that's really not that bad. So I'm really actually proud of the organization. I'm really proud that we were able to cut costs by like $25 million. I don't know if anyone's ever had to balance a budget, but cutting that kind of number That's a serious fucking big boy commitment, you know? And to beat plan and to be profitable and to do all these things, these are real accomplishments. And I attribute that to the guys that I work with. Right. My business partner, for better or worse, like me and my business partner, we know how to operate our business. When we're focused and your eyes on the ball, you tend to do better. Mm-hmm. Was I guilty, like most of us, of being unfocused? 100%. Mm-hmm. But I don't regret any of these moments in my life. If it was the story of when I was $7 million in debt to the story of when I was a couple $100 million in debt, I don't regret any of it.
Right.
It's like life happens.
Yeah.
And when I think about this, the last couple years for me, I actually think that these have been the best years of my life. I think I've had a much more sober kind of calling of what you need for versus what you want for. And that's something it's very, very important. I think we were culturally very, very indulgent. I know I was guilty of it, but I think it was really a part of larger kind of Western popular culture. Yeah. And I reflect on that, and maybe that's the buzzword for me today. I use that now 3 times, but I have 3 kids, so I think about, well, how are the decisions that I make today going to inform the lessons for my kids, later on in life?
Right.
And that just guides my way, and it becomes much easier to do the right thing.
Yeah. I hope you guys appreciate the knowledge he just dropped on you all. Mm-hmm. You told me in our last one-to-one that at one point you were like $8 million in debt, and like mm-hmm. the Wolves you couldn't go to any party or trade show without owing somebody money.
Sure.
And that was like horrific for you.
Yeah.
How does it compare? Like if that was on a scale of 1 to 10x, where are you at now?
I think that was in a much different time in my life. I think now the stresses that came with having to turn a business around, and contrary to popular opinion, that's in fact what we've done, mm-hmm. and done it quite effectively. Doing it when you have kids is a different kind of level of anxiety.
Back then you were just on your
own.
I
was I was dating or engaged to be married during that time. I don't remember exactly where I was with my wife at that time, before she was my wife, but different burdens, man. Yeah. It was like an Isuzu Trooper, 1-bedroom apartment. How deep really was it,
right.
Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, today I have, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of mouths to feed.
Yeah.
There's the trying to secure the viability of every business decision, and at the same time juggling, you're trying to run your business, but you're also trying to manage your liabilities, mm-hmm. and just managing your liabilities and managing the gross part of the business could be quite distracting.
Yeah.
So I'm just eager to get to a place going into next year, if there, where we get to focus really on what we're good at.
Yeah.
Because clearly focusing on, the parts that we're not good at. Mm-hmm.
Well, you told me back. I mean, it seems like the scales are different now, is what
mm-hmm.
you're saying, basically.
Yeah.
And with the growth that's all happening, it's, you wanted the growth, obviously. And
yes.
You told me once before to be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Do you regret the wishes?
Nah, dude. I've done so good in life. No.
Yeah.
Not for a second.
Okay.
Like here, I'm a kid from Lakewood, New Jersey, that how would I have seen the world like I've seen it? Mm-hmm. How would I have, forget about just the material things that I've acquired in life. Just the greatest wealth you can acquire are the things your eyes can see. Mm-hmm. I have seen some crazy shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that has the most value.
Right. You can't put a price tag on that.
You can't put a price tag being in Hacienda in Rio, or in Zhangjiaodi in Beijing, or being on a scuba diving in the middle of Acapulco somewhere, and crazy stuff. I mean, none of those sound that crazy, but even just random shit being in the White House,
Right.
like random shit. So, it's life happens, and that is a part of the journey for an entrepreneur. And if you genuinely know what entrepreneurship means, and that's one of your ambitions, be prepared for life
Yeah.
is going to happen.
This morning, there was a speaker by the name of Chip Kidd, who was a very accomplished book cover designer, and he said, "I'm too small to fail," which I thought was very poignant, and probably the antithesis to where you're currently at.
Yeah.
Do you ever sort of wish like you could be small again? Like you could,
No.
No, you want to be big. Okay.
Yeah.
No, it's good. It's two different total mindsets.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, too small to fail is like that's. Is Chip here? Is he here?
You can insult him. Make fun of him.
No,
Go
no,
ahead.
I don't want to insult him, but like that doesn't even make sense to me.
Right.
Like I don't even.
It does not compute.
I mean, well, just because life is so big.
Yeah.
Like, would you define your failures by the things that you got in your bank or what you don't? I mean, like, you're never too small to fail. I've seen people that have failed pretty bad just, like, splitting up with their spouse. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I've seen some messy kitchen shit that had nothing to do with, like, the bank.
Right.
I mean, so like really when you take an inventory of this stuff, it's you're never too small to fail, and you're certainly never too big to fail.
Yeah. Okay.
Failure's a part of life, man. It's like, look, my daughter, I remember when my oldest 7 had her first bout with stitches. Oh my God. And how many parents here? Okay, how many of your kids have had stitches? Okay, you remember do you have multiple kids? You remember the second kid getting stitches? The third is like, no big deal. The third one, you're like, shut the fuck up. That's how you're gonna learn not to fall.
Right.
That blood on your eye. So, I mean, failure is a part of growth. It's a part of our lives.
Yeah.
It is woven to success.
Yeah.
You cannot be successful without failing.
Okay. So that's a good segue into the next question, which
Yes.
is about, we have a lot of students in here.
Yes.
And I think a lot of times students coming out of school, graduating, applying for work, especially designers, are paralyzed by failure. Do you have any bits of advice to like students who are trying to just get out there and be on their own? I mean, even if your advice is like, go work for a huge conglomerate, go work for you, whatever, like what is sort of some guiding advice you might have for a student coming out right now?
I think the biggest, one of the biggest handicaps for creative people, one of our biggest Achilles heels is that it comes from the emotional part of our brain, right? But like it's, we live in a culture where if your commodity is, a cog or an automobile or creativity, you're still offering a service or business. So I think the key thing that I could say to young creative types is to not be overly emotional about your creative content and your creative authorship. I think we tend to get so overly emotional, indulgent on our own singular point of view that we lose sight of how other people see what you've done. I've always said it's like, there's like everything is a cliche, the thing is be the best cliche that you could possibly be. It's like there really is genuinely no, there are billions of people on this planet. I don't care how convinced you are in the drunken stupor of your random thought on a napkin, like chances are, statistically, somewhere else on this earth probably has the same idea.
Right.
Now, they might be locked up and in prison, or they might be in a country where they can't communicate,
right.
or they might be right around the corner. But you can never be so singular and self-indulgent to think that, you know what? My idea can change the world. The world just, Mother Nature, she's a son of a bitch. She'll just shake you off, dust,
It's always that
ashes
guy.
to ashes, dust to dust, whatever that saying is.
It's always that guy that sees the other guy that has similar work. He's like, oh, he bit my shit.
Yeah. So yeah.
No one else thought
It's
of
like,
that except you.
Look, you can't be overly emotional about that stuff, and you have to be able to. I say it's the call shit on yourself factor. How often do you look in a mirror and genuinely look at yourself in a way where you could call shit on yourself? Like, really be your own, your best critic. I think that's a very cathartic and healthy thing to do. And if you don't have that if you don't have the capacity to do that for yourself, know someone that will. Get someone that will, or some mechanism in life. If it's your faith, your parent, your girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, figure that out.
I mean, you sort of said this before about, you have no regrets, but I'm wondering if you would do anything differently, and on a very high level, not saying like, I wouldn't have hired that dude, I wouldn't have used this vendor, but like really 40,000 foot top level stuff, would you have said like, I would have whatever, blank? Anything that sort of sticks in your mind, or you have really like zero regret?
It's kind of like, is this a gotcha? Like, what are you trying to do here? Do you have any regrets?
Damn, I'm interviewing you, man.
No, it's kind of like a loaded question. I mean, like, what? It's kind of like, do you wish it didn't rain last week? Like, you can't change it. It's like having regrets. It's like acid that rots the can. It just stores up like this bitter thing that ends up rotting the can. Could I have done, shoulda, coulda, woulda? Yeah, you know what? But then it wouldn't have been the path that I'm on. Yeah. It's that whole straight line thing. Right. What are those regrets? How do you build the delta for those regrets? Because your vision is like right here in front of you. Sometimes it doesn't end up there. You imagine it's right there, and you open your eyes, and that thing's right over here. Right. So, I don't know. I've never found it a healthy thing to kind of have any real regrets. Yeah. Were the things that I fucked up on? Yeah, I fucked up on plenty of stuff, Right. Hey, hello.
But
Hey, raise your hand if you've never fucked up. You never fucked up? You just fucked up right there.
You told me also before that you sort of say your life is all about passion hunting. Yes. What are the next passions for you now? I mean, we went through some of the stuff that you've done. It seems like
there's a lot of interesting, stuff that I'm passionate about. I think one of the avenues that I've been really trying to break into, only because I really believe that it's the Wild West of like entertainment medium is video gaming, and it's something that I'm very passionate about. And if you know anything about the business, the barrier to enter is it's a very difficult business to enter. It really is like the old studio system in Hollywood in the 20s and 30s. It's a very, very difficult business to enter, but there's these interesting, unique moments of direct-to-consumer distribution models. If it's, now Xbox Live Arcade with a 2 gig footprint, or if it's iPhone, I'm very passionate about that as a medium of expression. And if anyone's familiar with what I did with Getting Up, that was like a real labor of love. And, I intend to, restore that brand one day. That's one of my passions. Art's a passion of mine. I'll probably...
Before about you trying to get back into actually doing
Yeah. So, I've been... one of the more indulgent things I was doing a couple of years ago heavily was creating a lot of art content, like a lot of it.
Personal art,
yes,
not commercial art, right?
Yeah, a lot of it. And I kind of reflect on it, and it was kind of like, it was like my therapy or something. Some of it's really dark too, it's kind of like fucked up stuff. And I look at it now, some of it I hate, which is what it should be, right? But that's something that would be nice to kind of share some of that, show my weaknesses, my vulnerabilities with that. There's other businesses, look, Complex Media is has a tremendous amount of kind of forward momentum. Yeah. Not kind of, real genuine forward momentum, and it's a brand that is near and dear. So I'd like to be able to position that thing for growth, and I think I've learned a lot now. I probably you could do things you could, I was always kind of driven by my ego. If it was one regret,
Okay.
come full circle.
Here it is.
I probably didn't, my ego would never allow for the idea of diluting my value.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's not necessarily good business to do that. There's sometimes a time where someone else's expertise and sometimes in that case money is going to add value. So I'm trying to now take those lessons, not necessarily regrets, but lessons, and have those inform my new business opportunities.
Right.
And hopefully I'll be smarter about stuff.
This morning when Paula Scher was talking, she was saying how, I don't know who was here, but she was saying how the Citibank job drained her so much that she started painting as a release. And then the painting sort of started coming into like commissioned artwork, and then she was getting sales on it, and then she had deadlines because she had installations to do. So the painting sort of became another path, and then it became another beast of hers.
Yeah.
You were just mentioning about art, and you're sort of thinking of the best way to show it. Like,
Right.
What are your concerns about showing your art?
I don't know. It probably shows my insecurities, the fact that I just don't even want to show it sometimes a little bit, right? I think maybe afraid of, it's one part where you can't, even notionally put blame on someone else if people dog it. So that maybe that's a bit of it, or maybe it's a bit of just people's, people I think we like to put people in buckets of what their competencies are. Like you're that guy that makes sweatshirts, or you're a fashion guy. Like
Right.
don't
Try this art
try
thing.
that painting thing. I mean, I've had that happen with gaming, frankly. And we've done a good job actually. Slowly, it's been a 7-year journey. Educating a pretty hardcore gaming community that we could contribute good content.
Right.
And so you got a part of it. Just you got to pay your dues.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you've been successful in one space doesn't mean you could just absolutely transfer that success to another space.
Right. I find it interesting though that you're actually.
Look at Eddie Murphy. Records. You remember the singing?
Yeah.
It's just the worst shit ever.
Right.
You
No, but I
know?
find it.
But he could
interesting,
actually sing.
Yeah.
He could actually sing, but he got so caught up with hanging out with Rick James, like he really believed it.
Uh-huh.
Like he was the next,
Right.
That's why you got to give props to Jamie Foxx. You might not like his music, but I think he's a talented guy. But there's a guy that, really did it.
Yeah. So it is a definite like strategic concern of yours, and like you coming out with art and how the art community perceives it, or the right.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. Who cares, really? Maybe. I don't know. Just time, really.
Right.
Resources, time.
Planets aligning.
Stars got to align. It's one of those things you just got to feel the vibe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And get on the board, and just try not to fall off.
Right. Do you find it difficult to balance the realities of being a billion-dollar company with trying to market to like youth, cool kids in malls and stuff? I mean, there's only really a handful of brands in this country, like Apple, Nike.
Mm-hmm.
Can't really think of many more that are in that realm of billion plus,
Mm-hmm.
like attracting kids in a mall.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you get to that scale by doing it internationally.
Uh-huh.
And business, if you travel the world, you learn that these markets are so dynamically different. Brazil, for instance, is a completely different positioning of the brand. In fact, we had import issues there. So as a part of building the business there, we had to manufacture everything in South America in order to get it in. We've now just only opened up our ability to import more with ease from other countries of origin product that's maybe, like for instance, outerwear that's really technical, hard to sew, that you might be producing in India or China. I wasn't able to make for years in Brazil, but yet we positioned the brand there one way. So you get like this, you get an understanding of how the American consumer is, how how you get a world view on this stuff. So that number sounds really like gigantic, but when you consider that's the full retail value, it's really like $500 million a wholesale, right? And then when you start to look at that number and say, well, there's 100 stores and you're doing, I don't know, however many million per store, you could see how you get there. And you think that it's really big, but it's really not that big. $1 billion company is really, $1 billion at retail. It's big, it's ambitious, don't get me wrong, but I mean, it ain't $9 million Ralph Lauren big. You know, it's not how, what's Nike at, like 12 or 13? Yeah. I mean, these are like small governments. I mean, so like to be of that scale is a much different scale. And I mean, brands like Quicksilver have managed to do it well. And DC approaching like pretty significant numbers. So, you know, I think the key thing is what I talked about before is you can't have nostalgia paralysis. And I think often I try to connect to what genuinely young people are vibing off of, rather than what I alone in my kind of very, you know, LES to 23rd Street kind of worldview thinks is what's cool. You know, I try to vet that by being aware of where a consumer base really is and what their feeling is, what's next, and how to signal to them. And also not having like, I think, drunken ambitions of trying to be something that I'm not. Mm-hmm. You know, like when I first launched Marc, Ecko, Cut and Sew, I had Ralph Lauren-itis. Yeah. Do you know? Excuse me, shut that off. That's not polite. You know, I had Ralph Lauren-itis where, you know, I wanted to do, you know, like the lapel and the, you know, the flat front pants, the non-denim. Denim is so passe. Denim. I don't want to look at denim. You know, denim is for Ecko Unlimited only. Right. Or that's too graphic. You know, like I was in, you know, it was kind of like here was my coming out party for that. And I was just so off the mark. I mean, people wanted to see that brand grow. There was a consumer base, but they were kind of scratching their head, like, because my consumer was really still either a sneakerhead or someone that grew up with my brand, actually liked my roots of graphic design and illustration and art and like graffiti. The more honest I was to what I was good at, which was me in a garage in Lakewood, New Jersey, airbrushing a t-shirt for like, you know, a friend or some girl I was hoping to be with, you know, that's being more authentic to who I've been since I was 14 years old. Right. So
how do you keep in, I mean, you mentioned like keeping in touch with youth. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're 37, you have 3 kids, you're married.
Sure.
How do you keep in touch with them?
Actually, having kids really keeps you in touch with youth. It's pretty interesting to see. Now, my kids are not really necessarily in the sweet spot of my demographic yet, but I already see how my daughter reacts to the brand. It's interesting. You know, you keep in touch by trying to surround yourself with people that are smart, and also trying to be at the you know, at the point of, you know, of where consumption happens. Having retail stores, for instance, is a great device. Yeah. You know, that one of the greatest devices, create the shortest distance between you and your consumer. Our website is a great device. You know, frankly, the wholesale model actually creates distance between you and consumer, because you got to get it through that barrier of the buyer. Right. And they're not always right. And it's interesting to see what the assortment looks like that gets sold into my own stores, you know, versus what it looks like, let's say, at a Macy's. It's very, very interesting. Yeah. So trying to, you know, it is a constant challenge of trying to balance that.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for your openness, your frankness.
Cheers, man.
Thanks for having me. We'll open it up to some Q&A.
Sure.
So if anyone has any questions for Marc, feel in the back. Oh, no, back there, I'm sorry. Okay, you could go.
Well, I get a sense of Marc, and as a marketing person, I truly understand why he connects to that consumer. My first reaction is, how does this white kid from New Jersey connect? Mm-hmm. But again, I didn't hear every word that he said. Sometimes you hear with your gut. Mm-hmm. And my gut was telling me that he's so true to his DNA, and you can't bullshit the consumer that he hits. They smell it a mile away. Mm-hmm. So my question is, it's not so much a question, but the idea, like, where do you meet your consumer? You listen to them? Do they market to you? You market to them? Or is it a collaborative effort where you, because you know what time it is. Mm-hmm. You know what's going on the street. Mm-hmm. Before you can smell the shift. Mm-hmm. And there is a shift going on now.
Sure.
You know, that kid, you don't want to be a gang kind of wants the Ivy League music,
Mm-hmm.
which is why, because Ralph is so true to his own brand.
Yeah.
The kids smell that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The same thing with,
Well, there's certain, look, all you could try to do is be as authentic to your, I think authenticity, is the great kind of, gauge. You have to have, there's like that internal, like, are you stretching your authenticity? Like, for instance, back when we were first growing, rave was really big. And, wide leg jeans were like a big, UFO, that brand was like a big trend. And I remember,
Yeah.
what's that? Yeah, the brand UFO.
I
Yeah.
founded that brand at the height of the Vietnam War.
Is that right?
Well, yeah,
Are we being punked right now?
I'm being
Right.
but when you just,
Yeah. So UFO had like the wide leg. You didn't have wide leg pants though back in the day. Okay. But you were doing some of that stuff, right? Right. Right. Right.
man wasn't wearing pleated pants.
Right.
We wore pleated pants. We made pleated pants.
Oh, okay.
Exaggeration.
Right.
But we knew the kid was protesting the Vietnam War.
Mm.
The label was the American flag.
Mm-hmm.
I created that label on
Wow.
a napkin.
Wow.
And I said, Leo, this is going to be the symbol. Then all of a sudden, we're watching an Easy Rider. Peter Fonda turns around, he's got the flag on the back of his jacket. And I said, that's it. And then he looks at it.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
The point is, we were authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we knew what the kids, what
Yeah.
they even knew.
Yeah. I think that's something that, when you study at university, that's not necessarily something you could teach. I mean, I think you got to send, students need to kind of vet that skill set by going out actually into the real world and trying to learn what the hell that means.
Yeah.
And you got to get in there, and it's messy, and you got to pull up your sleeves, and it's not always sexy. It's not nearly as ambitious, or it's not nearly as sexy as your vision paints it to be. And it's sometimes it's really salty and rough around the edges, but that's how you learn and kind of manage that radar.
I think a lot of large companies too, the mistake that they make is they gain this authenticity on their own for doing what they were known for doing. So like you look at companies like North Face or like Timberland or Nike and stuff, and then so they've gained this sort of momentum from their authenticity. Then all of a sudden one day they turn the tables and they ask, how do we be authentic now? We've sort of
Yeah.
lost our way. I think that's kind of another interesting point.
Yeah.
Let's go back there.
Someone recently defined an entrepreneur as an unemployable individual.
Yeah.
How does that sit with you? What do you think about that? Is that something you find to be true?
Yeah, that's probably pretty true.
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I probably, yeah. I don't know. I don't know. There is something disruptive about the nature of an entrepreneur, and it's right on the margins of like some kind of addiction or making up for something that happened in their lives. There's some like weird pursuit, of that drives you, that makes you very hard to kind of rein in. And I think a lot of the mistakes I made, frankly, professional mistakes, were largely because I didn't want to listen to the governance of a board or some other adult in the room, because just my blind ambition told me otherwise. So I think that there's a trait there that's not much further than like a Brandon Jacobs type who's willing to run into 5 guys that gross up to like 1,500 pounds or whatever, or a Mayweather or whatever. There's something just a little bit, or a little bit off, that gives you the suspension of belief in terms of your own threshold for pain.
Yep. Next question. Yes.
Sort of building on that question, I think that a lot of successful entrepreneurs attribute their success to a lot of different things. Some attribute it to, a unique value added. Others attribute it to management or implementation skill. And I'm curious, as an inspiring entrepreneur, as unaspiring entrepreneur, I'm curious what
And
you
aspiring?
and
Okay,
aspiring.
it's okay. I hope you're not an uninspired
Hopeful.
entrepreneur. That would not be good.
I'm curious how you would characterize sort of what drove your success compared to others who are trying to make it in your field.
I think a little bit of the underdog outsider thing, you know, a little of the what is that, Wings? Mr. Vanderbilt. Is that Mr. Vanderbilt? I thought that was one of my favorite songs of all time, Paul McCartney, Wings. Okay. Yeah, what were we just saying? We were just saying.
What do you attribute?
Oh, I'm sorry. You know, it's interesting to talk about like the whole like white boy thing. You know, not that I was maybe conscious of it, but maybe within social circles when I was growing up, maybe there was this cynicism about, you know, me being a part of the culture. I don't know. And maybe the fact that my educators in high school were always like, you're not really serious about like painting T-shirts forever. You know, are you like painting? You're not going to feed your kids by painting T-shirts. So there's always this, I think, this underdog thing. I remember meeting one person, probably like the 4th or 5th year into the business at a trade show. I'll never forget this guy. I won't say his name. Not that anyone would know him, but he was like, "You're too nice. You're too nice to succeed. You're not going to be successful because you're too nice of a guy. No, you won't. You'll see." And I've, you know, if it's that or if it was a big retailer saying, "How do you describe it? What it is you do exactly?" You know, and then being like, "Sweaters. Just give me more T-shirts." You know, so I think there's a little bit of that underdog thing. Sitting with, and I teased Renzo about this even, and I will say his name. I just dropped his name, sorry, like dandruff. Renzo Rosso from Diesel, you know, when I made the first prototype of Complex, and I did dinner with him, and I was like, would you consider advertising in here? And he looked at it, and he gave it to, you know, what's his name, the guy who does Maurizio, all the marketing. And you know, he's one of my mentors, Renzo. And Maurizio's like, "Why would we advertise in this shrine to you? This is a shrine to you. It doesn't make sense." I won't buy any advertising. Nike, same thing. And look, now, you know, years later, and we paid our dues. So I think a little bit of that underdog, you can't do it, I'll prove you otherwise thing. You need a little bit of that to drive you.
Hi. So you were talking about how when you got into business, hip hop was emerging, and then you're talking about how you're doing it in this sort of before it develops, right? This window of opportunity. So I guess if a kid in high school now, right, dreams of painting T-shirts of PD's family, you've done it already. So do you think that window of opportunity is constantly existing?
Sure.
Or
you can't, I call it like ambassador brands, right? You can't overtake ambassador brands. I can't overtake Quicksilver in the surf space. No matter how many surfers I try to sponsor, there's a certain amount of composite marketing and like consumer understanding that they just own that space. You know, Ralph Lauren, everything red, white, and blue, and turquoise, and in between, from the Hamptons to to the Cape. I don't know, right? A little bit of Great Gatsby, post-industrial revolution, new money, America, red, white, and blue. I mean, Tommy, no matter how close he got, he was just a facsimile of Ralph. So there's always new windows emerging.
Right.
You know, I think the dynamism, if that's a word, I'm not sure, that exists today that we must be aware of in this country is that because we have still a very indulgent worldview. As much as, you know, post 9/11, we think, oh, kumbaya, let's all get along. We know, you know, Judeo-Christian, Muslim, like different world. We know that. We still walk with the swagger like America is the epicenter for the creative class. We have to be very, very mindful of how good other countries are becoming at our game. So the opportunities exist, but you have to understand it's on a world stage. You have to understand you have to be very, very sober of the ambitions, the similar ambitions that exist now in Sao Paulo or in Shanghai for a like-minded individual, and that their odds are pretty good. So, there's a new dynamism or new window that exists, and it will exploit media in a new way. It'll exploit, it has different barriers to enter, and there'll be a different degree of luck. Like, look, the one thing that you can't deny that I had a great deal of was luck. So.
Okay, over here.
You have the clothing line, the magazine, and video games.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine you have like somebody kind of heading teams.
Yes.
For those, what do you look for in like the leaders and?
I see a resume coming up.
We typically look for someone. I think in this day and age, I think it's interesting generationally now. I think the economy sets young creative people up to have to be a lot more responsible than maybe kids were. Even just, I don't mean to use the word kids like in a demeaning way, but young folks had the luxury or the illusion of being a few years ago. I think really folks that are right brain and left brain, like to be someone who's that has the chops to be a genuine either creative director or, senior management in the creative space. They have to be as critical of the need to make their effort self-sustaining as they are to create something that's cool. So if you're just like in like some ivory tower creating for you and your friends inside Jokeville, like I suppose that there's a class of business there that to be had. But in my company, you have to be able to, to balance like what's an emergent trend with what's a responsible thing in terms of the real business opportunity. Like how do we seize the moment, timing, and how do I look at a sales report and can make as much sense out of a sales report and care about it as much as I do a trend report. I think that's what you look for.
Any other questions?
With a company like yours where it's so important that your products are recognizable as your brand, how do you find the balance between maintaining that visibility of your brand and also staying fresh?
How do you find the balance of, well, I think trying to throw some curveballs every now and again. I think my ability, even though it might just be, maybe I'm delusional, I don't know. I think based on the feedback that I get from my consumers, I think being someone that's not just on the sidelines, but that's trying to be in the game in other spaces, be it the magazine or in this case, complex media, and the kind of do-it-yourself story that young people connect to, and I get credit for that. So I think that's like a transferable thing that, it's hard to, I can't quantitatively tell you the exact transfer, but I could tell you qualitatively, I think that's been meaningful to my consumer to see like, oh, he's the guy that did that. He's not just the logo guy. Even the pursuits in the gaming space, and there's other efforts that I need to do. I mean, I'm constantly reimagining how I could have a better dialogue, and less and less. I mean, it's about print, less and less, obviously. So you got ideas? Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming today. Before we depart for the reception, I just want to sort of give you a few closing thoughts. That you always ask me to do that, but 3 years I've been doing this. I've seen over 40 speakers from all different walks of life and all different categories and all different levels of success. And the one thing that always comes up is that, A, there was no plan, there was no blueprint, there was no sort of premeditated way that they were going to find themselves in these categories or in these places where they can do what they love. There was just a passion. And so we always ask our guests, well, go back to your lives, go back to the office or your studio or the classroom or your garage or bedroom, wherever it is that you do your work, and try to remember that passion should always be the guiding point of view. And every year people kind of nod and say, yes, that's good. And about 2 days later, we're all looking at a stats report or reading a book or doing whatever it is we have to do. And sometimes that passion gets kind of sidelined. And then about 3 months down the line, we're just kind of doing the drudgery. So, like we've said for the last 3 years that I've been working with Imprint, think about what these speakers said, less for the content in terms of the detail, but more for the spirit. Because every single one of the speakers that got up here today had the same point of view. They had one thing in their lives that they had to do, that they were passionate about, whether it's eating locally, or it was following a dream, or it is design or book design, whatever it was, they just had the courage to follow that passion. And sometimes blindly, and sometimes with good results, and sometimes with negative results. But I think that's what Imprint is trying to focus on. I think that's what we're trying to promote. So having said that, we will all see you at the Soho Grand in about an hour, the Penthouse. In the meantime, warm up and stretch your legs. Thank you.